Hi everyone, and welcome to my next instalment for GCSE Macbeth. This one focusing on Macbeth's soliloquy from the beginning of Act 1, Scene 7. I'll start with a quick summary of the plot, up to and including the scene, followed by an overview of important context, before breaking down some of the key language and structure devices used within Macbeth's soliloquy. In the scene before this, King Duncan, Banquo, and the other Thanes arrive at Inverness Castle to be greeted and welcomed by Lady Macbeth. As Act 1, Scene 7 begins, Macbeth enters the stage in a state of confusion and heightened anxiety. Having discussed the possibility of murdering Duncan with Lady Macbeth in Act 1, Scene 5, Macbeth is now having second thoughts and utters a doubt-filled soliloquy before the audience where he questions the overreach of his ambition and convinces himself that murdering the king would come back to haunt him. This is an important extract because it illustrates the limits of Macbeth's ambition and shows a human side to his character. He is not a villain through and through, and seems to wrestle with the morality of the dark deed he is contemplating. In addition, it shines a light on how Lady Macbeth is able to influence him as the latter part of the scene unfolds. In terms of context for this scene, our focus will be the great chain of being. This was a philosophical belief about life which was widely held during both the medieval era, when Macbeth is set, and the Jacobean era, when the play was written. According to thinkers such as Plato and Aristotle, God set out an order for all living things in heaven and on earth. This was called the great chain of being. In simple, God, who reigned over heaven, was the highest form of authority. Beneath God were spiritual beings, such as angels. Below these spiritual beings was believed to be the physical beings, over which kings were the highest authority. The chain then continued down from nobles to lowly peasants, then to animals, plants, and eventually earth at the bottom. The importance for society was that God ordained an order or hierarchy over everything. This meant that kings were given their position by God, and all beneath them owed allegiance and should follow their will. This became known as the divine right of kings. So why is this important for Macbeth? Well, at this point in the play, Macbeth is contemplating murdering the divinely appointed king, Duncan. To Jacobeans, this was considered not only a crime against humanity, but also against God and nature. If the chain was disrupted, say by a murderer of a righteous king, all of nature would be disrupted as well. Now we'll read the extract from the beginning of Act 1, Scene 7. Macbeth enters the stage alone and utters a soliloquy where he bears his confused and conflicted thoughts to the audience. Remember, in his previous scene with Lady Macbeth, it is her who seems most convinced of killing Duncan. She urges, "He that's coming must be provided for," a roundabout way of saying Duncan must be killed. Macbeth simply replies, "We will speak further," which suggests he has not yet made up his mind. As I read this soliloquy, pay close attention for language which implies Macbeth is conflicted, as well as contrasting imagery relating to death and heaven. Do you think Macbeth is ready to commit a murder? "If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence, and catch with his surcease success, that but this blow might be the be-all and end-all here. But here, upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. But in these cases we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions which, being taught, return to plague the inventor. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poison chalice to our own lips. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, both strong against the deed. Then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off. And pity, like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other. This soliloquy is clearly a moment of extreme doubt. Macbeth is often portrayed exasperatedly pacing the stage, visually distressed by the decision he is trying to make. His indecision is clear from the beginning, as his first lines, "If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it was done quickly," indicate that he is weighing up the possibilities of the murder. Shakespeare uses repetition throughout the opening lines of the soliloquy, with "if" being used twice and "but" a further 4 times. This language of speculation and contradiction signposts Macbeth's doubt at an early stage in the speech. We are also given insight into the reasons for Macbeth's doubt. He first wonders if the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success, which basically means if I can commit murder and be successful without it getting back to me, it would be worth it. And in the line, "we jump the life to come," he seems to accept that the deed may have consequences in the afterlife, which he appears willing to risk. Here you can see the link to the context of the Great Chain of Being. Macbeth is clearly aware that his own position in society is below that of King Duncan's. He also seems aware that he cannot get away with the murder of a king forever, and if he waits until his own death, he will pay the price eventually. However, Macbeth then discusses the possible result of violence using 2 metaphors. First, bloody instructions refers to the murder itself, which he then says might come back to plague or haunt him. Then he uses the metaphor of a poisoned chalice, which he would put to his own lips. The chalice here symbolises the prize of the crown, a thing of great value to Macbeth. But the adjective poisoned serves as a warning to himself that the risk of killing a king could result in his own death and punishment. We could infer that Macbeth is beginning to reason that the reward may be short-lived if he takes the crown by violence. The tone then switches from anxious to more assured, as Macbeth puts forward 2 arguments for not killing Duncan. First, the king is his family, or kinsman in the text, and superior. And secondly, Macbeth is hosting the king in his own home, where he says guests should be protected. Building on this, he then credits Duncan with being a good king, being clear in his great office, before Shakespeare employs a wide array of biblical references to impress upon the audience Macbeth's fear of heavenly retribution. He describes Duncan's good qualities pleading like angels, before he personifies the emotion of pity as a newborn baby, or heaven's cherubim, which are a type of angel, crying out for Duncan and filling every eye with tears. This epic biblical language suggests that Macbeth, again, is acutely aware of the eternal consequences of the murder. Finally, the soliloquy ends with Macbeth's admission that his ambition has gone too far. Shakespeare uses a final metaphor in the lines, "I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other." A spur is a small spike which attaches to a rider's heel to encourage a horse to move. Macbeth says he has no spur, showing he recognises his ambition has limits. He might want to be king, but his ambition is vaulting or jumping too high, which again seems to reference Macbeth's awareness that he is attempting to break the chain of being by forcing his way to the top. He seems to know that it will result in his ultimate failure. The scene plays an important structural role in the story, since Shakespeare makes it clear that Macbeth is not willing to go through with the plot based on his own reasoning. He is characterised as wary and conflicted here, a character lacking conviction, which sets the scene for the dramatic argument which will occur between him and Lady Macbeth in the latter half of Scene 7. I hope you've enjoyed this analysis of Act 1, Scene 7. If you found this short video useful, please support my channel by liking this video and, of course, clicking the link to subscribe for more illustrated literature content.